Don't ever close the doors on people. Be open to like building and keeping those relationships, but build them on trust. Don't build them on some hidden agenda. Don't build them on something that you want to get a quick win, whatever that win is to you, build them to last, and that will kind of get you forward.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage.
So imagine you're standing at a crossroads. One path is well worn and predictable, the other is overgrown, winding into the unknown. Which would you choose? On today's episode, we're going to be exploring what gives writers the courage to venture down uncharted paths, both on the page and in life. Today I'm joined by Ivan Radovic, who knows a thing or two about navigating pivotal junctures. As a young man, he left his home and descended into conflict, and years later, as a business leader in New Orleans, he had to find his footing again after Hurricane Katrina upended everything. But through it all, one principle has been his North Star: trust. And in his new book, Trust 360, Ivan shares the field-tested wisdom on how authentic leaders build that trust even in an ever-changing world. So I'm excited for an amazing conversation. Ivan, welcome to the show.
Danielle, thank you for having me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around, because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very insightful one because trust is the backbone of everything that we do in our lives, whether it be in our personal lives or our workplace. And I think that your story definitely teaches a lot about that. So let's talk a little bit about you and your journey. I mean, you left your homeland, missed a war, and then came here and had to face Hurricane Katrina. A little bit about what I said in the introduction, but tell us a little bit about that and how did those early experiences shape you as a leader today?
I think for many people, that live, the experiences are what shape us. The experiences what grow us as a people, they grow us who we are. More that we experience them, the better it is. A lot of new generations today, gets trained to be only on a positive side, to have like positive experiences. What I have learned and what I shared even in the book is that we need to experience both negative and positive experiences. Those negative experiences, shape us who we are. They build resiliency and they teach us how we behave in life. So I have like a lot of those. I mean, I don't want to sound like, I gotta have a lot of positive experiences in my life, but some of those early goings, when I first came to United States, in 1991, this is on the brink of the civil war in the former Yugoslavia that actually nobody expected it's going to end up like that. It's going to last for full 5 years, and that's going to be happening in the middle of the Europe, and they're going to have like such a severe atrocities, and I was kind of in the middle of that, like, actually I came on exchange program in high school, like, to, and just still going to be here for 1 year. And then I just, as things were boiling up, just, kind of sink or swim, like situation. And it's taught me a lot. But like in those early days, also taught me about how you behave in life, how do you actually grow as a person, and that growth was like very much based on trust. It's kind of what I learned, which was different from the culture that I came from. And actually, it was mentioned in the book, one of my very, very good friend, like, another, great entrepreneur, this woman, mentioned, it's like, how can you coming from this part of the world where trust is not something, like, that's, you know, that occurs very often, not even in a business, relationship, and it was really tainted, like, by a lot of situations of communism and everything that was going on in Eastern Europe. How can somebody like that, like, write about trust? And what this was really kind of ignite me that I do have to do that, because that's what brought me in United States first, and then working globally, like in a lot of different continents, experiencing like similar issues. But it brought me like to make that shift, and that shift, where both from like personal life and even like early all the jobs that I had, like getting myself through college, like I was building relationships, around me through people, and was this relationships are based on like a deep trust. And that's how we grow as people. That's what it taught me. Those diversity, adversities, that have happened early on, and then even throughout, like just kind of surviving those first couple of years, putting myself through college, through all the changes. And there was so many different adversities that happened during that time. We could actually have like probably full television series on that. But kind of the one that I'm going to just kind of focus on one that you mentioned, like it happened later in life, where I was just starting. So after like, surviving this whole adversity of trying to stand myself up, in the new world, like, I'm at like, you know, I was left, like, those days with nothing in my pocket, and I had to figure out how to survive, how to get myself through school, like, and everything. But then kind of fast forward 2005, living in New Orleans, I was pretty early in my career, and and just kickoff started like in a new business. And where all my clients, or our clients were like basically within the close area. And then Hurricane Katrina happened, and all of a sudden was like we're doomed, like this everything, that we kind of start building, all of a sudden shut down, like in a matter of one day. And we just have to like build again. And basically where I went to, like, to all those trusted relationships, that I established in life, to kind of move forward, and people like who we build those things, and they kind of, the big message here is don't never close the doors on people. Be open to, like, building and and keeping those relationships, but build them on trust. Don't build them on some hidden agenda. Don't build them, like, on something that you want to get a quick win, whatever that win is to you, build them to last, and that will kind of get you forward. So that's kind of like really what drove me in early days, and what kind of motivated me to write this book and kind of go through all of this. And kind of a lot of people, like, they're in business, and they're entrepreneurs, they go through adversities very often. There is one good day and one bad day. So you learn that. But
Yeah.
again, like, driving forces there, like, if you build a good network of trust, that being your employees that actually in the book refer to team members. We all become like members of this big team, like, whether it's team, it can be your social network, team could be your business network, team could be your clients, team could be your like partnering companies, that you enter like relationships to work on some bigger projects, bigger things. They all, that whole network, whether it's your personal, your business network, is always, that the trust is long lasting. Don't ever like try to build your relationship on a quick wins.
Right. Well, wow. Thank you for walking us through those experiences. I can only imagine the struggle that you went through. I could never even imagine. I know the Hurricane Katrina was devastating, and the war I couldn't even imagine. But I think what's wonderful is the resilience that you showed throughout all of that. And I mean, here you are now in a position to be a leader and to embrace that trust, regardless of the experiences you've had. So branching off of that, I'm curious to know if you could maybe share an example with us, a time that you had to make a leadership decision that involved a lot of trust. What guides that choice for you?
So I'll go from like one example, like,
Of course.
from very early on in my business life, that when you encounter, people that you're still kind of evaluating who they are.
Mhm.
And in one of the early days, like, in my consulting career, I was doing a training class, for leadership. And this company uh, put as a guest, to be in that class, one of their suppliers. And for first, like, I didn't know what to think about it. And, because it's very, it's almost like, somebody potentially throws your competitor into like your like into your business, into your work, to compete with you while you're doing work. So we found this like, really awkward situation. And and how we even navigate those waters when, almost it feels like, there's a potential of somebody just taking off our intellectual property, just kind of like being there, like, being set. But given that this was our client wish, we had very little chance to change that. So what did we do? We actually took a different approach. Like, I had my training partner at that time was working on me in that on the class, and who was actually also my business partner to this day, one that's mentioned in the book. And we kind of huddle and say, what do we do with this like three individuals, like, who are sitting? And we said, well, let's just work if we can develop like a, relationship, if we can kind of take it from the point that they're not just a competitor, because they were very much, like, competitor, like of ours, as they appear. Uh, but then we, through discussions and working and trying to understand who they are as people, because this training was like 4 weeks long. So over the 4 weeks, we went from suspicion to developing very deep trusted relationships that actually help us navigate. This was right before Katrina happened.
Right.
So that's why I'm kind of linking this whole story, that as we, kind of worked in developing like, this trusted relationship, we called upon that one to actually help us get out of like, what happened, in Katrina, and getting like, somebody. So the moral of this story is, and it's also that this is in the book, I think is in the first, is it chapter 1 or 2? It's actually chapter 2, I believe.
Okay.
That talks about this. But the moral of this story is that don't never like assume and put person in the box, from the day one. Be very open, like, to spend some time and understand who the people actually are. Because at the end of the day, we actually teamed up with this competitor, and 4 months after Katrina hit, like, we received this huge deal to work on over like, period of 6 years, which was really kind of leapfrog our consulting business and made us like, very successful, like, after that. But that's kind of like one situation, where I really, you know, which was is still I was still on the learning, like, just kind of like, you're so like, concerned about somebody, almost being against you, like you're doing some stuff, that is kind of awkward. You're forgetting the fact, that we're all human and we just need to kind of bring the relationship at a level, like that we trust each other, find, like, what is in common, and those kind of common threads, like trends that we had, like, with this group help us, develop something very significant in the future. And but and kind of when I'm working on my next project, that's kind of at the very end of the book. Sorry, I'm jumping kind of all over the place here, but it's the end of the book is that nothing lasts forever, so we need to be very careful, both in business and in life, when we notice that the door is closing. In this case, this company ended up being purchased, by another even larger business. And that point, our relationship, kind of disappear, where we need to kind of find like another door to go into, and so forth. But you're continuously looking into this, and you have to understand, maybe like, there is something expires and then you have to move forward.
Right. Well, thank you for walking us through that. Again, it's a lot to understand, and I think it takes a lot of, practice and experience, just like you have, in order to really grasp these principles and this trust framework. But I'm glad that you lay it all out for us in Trust 360, because anybody who wants to know a bit more about what you just explained can pop into the book and find more details about that framework. I mean, because everyone he does, lay out that approach for us in the book about building trust across teams, clients, suppliers, communities. And that's just a great example of what he just described to us now. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your coming projects too. That's great. But if people want to take one core message or lesson from Trust 360, what do you think that should be? What impact do you hope this book will have? I mean, of course, there's trust building, but what else does that central message have to give to us?
Well, it's it's one is very simple. I think it's like,
Yeah.
reiterate a couple times in a book, build your relationship on trust. Don't build them, based on your title. And I think, that's kind of the message where sometimes, leaders, and even like, just people in a company, sometimes I see doctors, lawyers, and politicians, and you name it, like, they just, because they are somebody or something, they believe that everybody needs to like just believe them and trust them and work with them. And I think that's a wrong assumption. I think, what we as a people, as a as a leaders, we have to always work on developing a trust without our titles, without our ranks. And also, like, have great deal experience, working with military. And even in military, people start understanding, because, military is experiencing a big shift, through accepting in new generations. And new generations, are very different. And they are, those describing also as a chapter in the book, on the new generation, where they don't just go to the job interview and and kind of answer the questions, what you're gonna do if you come work here. They come to the interview, what I'm gonna get if I come work here. And it's a really different environment, where everybody to every organization, every leader to be successful have to be adaptable, have to understand that they can just like, hey, I have this title and therefore, you shouldn't obey me, understand me, or do whatever I say, because that's changing. And I'm introducing a concept, that's also introduced by a very dear friend of mine. Is something called reciprocal mentoring. And reciprocal mentoring is a very, very important aspect, of what is changing in today's work environment, but it's also what's changing in family environment. Used to be that mother and father, like would direct everything at home, but now the new generations, there's so much more tech savvy. There's so much, more information. They get information load. They understand things. So it's very important that we, from the people like from older generations, they're like, in the workforce and family, like, to teach experiences, but then allow the new generations to teach the new approaches and new technologies and new things, coming in the world, like to those old generations. So in that aspect, that's what we call, like, we have to accept this reciprocal mentoring to, to strive. And, and that's why I think, kind of, going even back to, to original question, it's kind of like, it's just that message is, don't, wherever you are, how, no matter how educated you are, what's your title is, what's your rank, don't assume that you are immediately a trusted person because of your rank. Because, people, like, don't work that way, and it's going to be less and less of that, as you go forward with all the more Gen Zs, millennials, all being in the workforce now, like, and maturing in the workforce. This is changing. So I think it's kind of like my message. I want to make sure that people don't think about the titles and the level of education as something that's going to just drive them going forward.
Understood. Yeah, trust has to be earned. It's not just a given. If you're in a certain position, it has to be something that, you build up over time and you get from people. So I completely understand that. And to everybody listening, if you're wondering how to do that, well, Yvonne lays that all out in the book. So you can go check it out and find more information about it. But before we begin to wrap up, I'd love to touch a little bit on some writing tips for the audience today. We're all a bunch of authors listening, so we'd love to know if you have any insights about writing in particular that other people can benefit from. Was there anything that you learned along the way that you think other people could also benefit from in terms of writing?
Hmm. This I'm glad you asked this question. I just happened to uh, go to the concert that was a tribute to John Williams.
Okay.
Like, some of you knows, like, who John Williams is. Like, he's a composer of the most, like, best Hollywood movie themes, like, out there. And and one thing that John mentioned, you have to have a quiet space. You have to, like, spend time alone so you can develop, those great ideas, and you have to capture them right then, right on when they develop. And what I learned, and kind of that, just because I heard it yesterday, it's like, oh my God, like, and I just, this is exactly, what I was like, thinking and even like talking about, like, this is, you have to just take, whenever those ideas comes, you got to close yourself, like, and capture them. Because writing is not like, okay, I'm gonna schedule, and at least in my case, it's not something that I'll schedule myself today to write from 8 to 12. You know, it's not like, scheduled job. You have to get inspiration. When you get that inspiration, you have to just take advantage of that inspiration. If you're if you're a writer and you're at home with your family and that inspiration moment comes, ask everybody for permission, to get your space, and that will, like, drive forward. I remember, like, one time while I was writing this book, I had, like, this moment. And I was in my house, and everyone was pretty busy. So I asked for permission. Hey, I have something, and you just let me be, for here for some time, and don't just interrupt me. And I was going on for 36 hours. I didn't, like, sleep, like, I might have just grab a coffee or a little snack, but, it would just, everything was going. And I think you have to capture those moments and really, allow yourself that space. And it's so bizarre, how those moments come, like, kind of, in this show that I was watching last night, John Williams wasn't there, like, but they had all his messages there, like, on as they were playing. There was kind of classical music concert, because of all his theme pieces, from Jurassic Park, from Star Wars, from Memories of the Geishas, from Superman, from Home Alone, and all of these things. But in between, there were all his messages, like, and a lot of messages were just driven, about capture, like, your ideas at the time that they start, and keep them and work on, then allow yourself that quiet space. And I
Right.
don't want to, like, kind of like quiet space is something that I'm actually very passionate about too. This is kind of, I don't want to like put, that's a very forward message. It's probably my 2027 project, about, teaching leaders, about having quiet space, because there's well in a quiet space today. But kind of relating it, writing a book, you have to have the quiet space, but it's not a scheduled quiet space. That's the problem, because the scheduled quiet space, yeah, but, maybe that's not your best thinking moment, because you might be motivated by something that you hear. You might be motivated by something that happens. You might be just motivated, something just comes in your head, like, and you just need to put it out there. But whenever that happens, ask for permission to have the time alone, to capture it.
Right.
And that
Understood.
and again, like, and it's, yeah, it's just because it happens last night, and I heard it from like John Williams writing like his best masterpieces, and so, like, I had to, like, do that, because it would never happen if I haven't done that.
Of course. Yeah. So first off, thank you for sharing that. I think it's, when you find inspiration from somebody else like John Williams for you, that only goes to heighten your own abilities and creativity. And I'm glad that you drew from that to enhance your process. And everybody listening today, I mean, Yvonne has some great points there. You need to, find the routine that works best for you. And he clearly did. So thank you so much for that. But yeah, so as we begin to wrap up, I'm curious if you have any last words of wisdom for the audience, something they could take on with them as they continue throughout their day. What do you think we should leave them with?
One thing that kind of relating to the writing process, like relating to anything in your life, don't never tell yourself that you cannot do something. And I never thought I'm gonna write a book. That was not. I was not a good writer. I failed freshman college English twice. Like, before I finally was able to pass it. It was not my thing. But it's like, but you know, but that's what you always want to, like, convince yourself that you can actually do something, that you can overcome your weakness. That you can get ahead, and you can actually do. You can tell, I can do that. And I think overcoming your weakness, it's the greatest motivation in your life. So go there and, like, and overcome your weakness, like, make yourself feel good, and you'll really find yourself motivated when you overcome your weakness. So that would be something that I would really like to put out there for audience. Never say I can't do something, because there is a way to do it.
Of course. Yeah. So never say never. Keep believing. Just give it a try. And I mean, you're a perfect example of that. You never thought you'd write a book, and here you are now. And I'm sure even when you went through those trials that we were talking about earlier, you never would have assumed you'd be where you are now either. So just having a positive mindset, building, trust in others, that's how we get there. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's really been a pleasure diving into your life and into Trust 360. If people want to get connected with you, where's the best place for people to head? Do you have a certain website or link that they can click on and join?
So, like, my consulting company name is, you could go to www.novaces.com, and we have, like, in a lot of ways, like, to reach out or connect there. Obviously, everybody can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also, like, on X, on Instagram. So please connect with me. Happy, like, to share ideas. And also, like, I'm also happy to share my email. It's just IRADOVIC at novaces.com. Just my first initial, my first name and last name at novaces.com. And all those names are in a book, like, so you can easily pick that up.
Okay, well, perfect. Everyone, we're going to put the links in the description box of this podcast today. So click on over and get connected. And I love that. Yvonne, it's been such a pleasure to meet you and hear your story. And to our community listening today, I hope this conversation has inspired you also to examine the role of trust in your own life and relationship. As Yvonne says, it's not just a soft skill, it's the bedrock on which resilient relationships and organizations are built. So again, check out Trust 360, check out his links, and until next time, stay curious, stay open, and keep walking through those doors that lead to unexpected places. You never know where they're going to take you. Until next time, have a great day, everybody.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.